Now, this evening's program is going to be with Harmeet Goindi, and he is a financial analyst. And I am thrilled, and I've heard only wonderful things about him, as I told him. He has done this program at Tuckahoe Library to rave reviews. And so it is my pleasure to introduce Harmeet. Hello, Harmeet.
Thank you, John. So, welcome everyone. Welcome everyone. It's good to see so many people today, over 20, right? So it seems
yes,
like
22. Yeah.
Very hot topic. And rightfully so, it has been in news for a while, both for good stuff and bad stuff, right? As you have been watching. So, and again, right, the problem is that not many people know about this whole thing called Bitcoins and cryptocurrencies. It's very opaque and it sounds very complex. And what I'm going to try to do today is talk about it, try to give you a background about this whole concept of cryptocurrency. And hopefully, by the end of it, you would have an understanding of what it is and what it is not, right? Because there is a lot of hype around it and a lot of it is not really true. So the way it'll go is I'll talk for about, 45, 50 minutes. And then at the end, I would answer your questions. So if you have a question, please put it in the chat that comes with Zoom. And once the talk is over, I will go through them one by one. And yes, please put yourself on mute while I'm speaking. Okay, so the question is, right, why are we talking about it right now? Why are you here and why am I talking about cryptocurrency? So cryptocurrency market right now is about $2 trillion. Earlier this year, it was about $4 trillion, right? Which is bigger than GDP of most countries, barring China and US. And it's growing at a rapid pace, right? It was 50% growth year on year for past 3-4 years. It's a matter of time when it becomes something that's bigger than the economies of US or China. So it is something that is entering mainstream. It's being adopted by banks, JP Morgan, Goldman, all the financial institutes. Meta, Facebook is coming into it. Apple, LinkedIn, even Twitter lets you have your NFTs as your avatar. Venture capitalists have poured in trillions of dollars into it, right? Hedge funds are trading it. And sports, NBA, National Basketball Association, came up with NFTs called Top Shots, where they sell sort of NFTs of cards, so to speak, of shots and plays. And the most expensive one was a dunk by LeBron James that sold for $1 million, right? So it has entered mainstream and it will replace a lot of traditional industries, right? So it is something that you should not ignore, right? You should be interested in this and try to understand this. But for me personally, right, the reason I am interested in cryptocurrency is because of the technology that comes with it, right? It's ushering a new web called Web3, right? Web 1 was technically, when the .com happened. Web 2 was Facebook, Google, LinkedIn, and this is Web 3. It's a new sort of paradigm of thinking about internet. And the biggest part about this is the decentralized aspect of it. So if you look at internet right now, well, it was supposed to be decentral. It is not, right? You have 5 companies that control it. It's Apple, Google, Facebook, Amazon, right? They control everything, right? So if you are not on Google, for example, you don't exist, right? To do any community activity, you need to be on Facebook. And these companies that sit in the middle for both the publishers, the creator of content and the consumer of content, and they charge a lot of rent, right? And they have a lot of power. And so this is something that Web3 is trying to take away from it and give power back to users and people who make content, right? So that is why it's a great, I think it's a next revolution in computing. And it's a new way to think about and solve traditional problems. So traditionally, everything depends on having a central company or a person sitting in the middle and taking care of everything. This takes away that, right? It gives power back to everyone, right? So that's another reason why I like it. And it is already being implemented in finance, in real estate, right? In art, if you've heard about NFTs. One of the painting Beeple sold for $60 million. In law, in legal contract, for example, so typical contract, you have lawyers writing contracts and you're executing it. And if you don't, you go to court and there is a case and, it's a long drawn process. But with Web3, everything is into smart contracts. So you cannot renege. You have to fulfill your contract because that's how the code is written. So it's going to be very interesting to sort of when it comes and takes over a big chunk of what lawyers and judges do right now. And then the newest part that is interesting is what is known as decentralized autonomous organization, or DAOs, which is bringing this whole idea of decentralization into governance. So now you can have companies or local government that are all decentralized, and you don't need a central place to do work. People can be anywhere in the world and they can contribute, and depending on how much they contribute, they can get that much salary or money or upside. Right? So this is, again, very nascent stage, still developing, but it has great potential, which is why I like it, and which is why many hedge funds are and venture capitalists are coming into it and pouring money into it. So let's just go a little bit deeper into it. So what does cryptocurrency mean? So cryptocurrency basically is nothing but two words: cryptography and currency. You put it together and you have cryptocurrency. It borrows heavily from the concepts of currencies, of money, and the concepts of cryptography, and it joins them, and then it has made something that is very, very powerful. So to understand cryptocurrency, we need to understand both cryptography and currency in a little bit more details. Okay. So let's start with cryptography first. So cryptography in a simple term is nothing but communication in presence of adversaries. So if you go back in history during the time of war, I would like to send a message to the other king or the general who's fighting the war. But if I send a message through messenger, there was a chance that messenger would be captured and I would lose the message and the secrets would be spilled and the enemy will know what my next movement is. And so to solve the problem, people started encoding messages. This, for example, this is in 7th century BC, the Greeks used what is known as sightail. So sightail is nothing but a leather strip where you write a message, right? And it is gibberish. So if you look in the bottom of the screen, this IRYYATVH doesn't mean anything, right? But so if a messenger who's taking this leather strip is captured, you don't lose anything. But what happens is if it reaches the person who is intended to, he will wrap the message around the stick. Stick had multiple sides. And once you wrap around it and read across the strip, you can read the message. So this gibberish, if you wrap it around a 5-sided stick and read across, it says, I am hurt very badly, help, right? So this is how the earliest encryption happened, right? And both the senders and the receiver would need to have the same kind of stick, 7-sided, 10-sided, 8-sided, whatever with particular dimensions, and then you could send and exchange message. Again, this had a problem because what if the stick is lost, if the stick is misplaced, right? You would sort of lose the message. Then, of course, the Romans had a better way, I suppose, to do encryption. They used what is known as alphabet shift, which it simply is basically shifting letters by a few. So let's say if you shift by 3, so let's say if A becomes D, B becomes E, and so now when you write a message, when someone captures it, it doesn't make sense. It's gibberish. Now, when the receiver gets it, he knows the shift is 3 or 4, whatever we get decided earlier, and he can easily read the message. And the beauty of this is you don't have to have those stakes or anything beforehand. All you could say is settle on an algorithm. For example, let's shift the letters by the day of the month. So if it's 6th of January, we shift by 6th. If it's 8th of January, we shift by 8, right? And that's simple. And so, that was one way of encrypting it. Pig Latin is another example of encryption, right? Those of you who know Pig Latin could probably read it. And decoder rings, this is what you used to get in cereal boxes back in the days. Again, same thing. You encrypt your data using whatever the decoder ring said. And this was a nice way of encrypting messages, except this one was had a weakness. It was susceptible to what is known as frequency attack. So English language, for example, has certain letters that are more common, letter S, T, A. And that's why when you play Wordle, the first thing that you guess is stare or taser, because those are the common letters. And so even if you have shifted it, let's say you have replaced S with Q, when you are reading this gibberish message, you would see a occurrence of Q that is more than any other letter. So you would know, hey, this Q probably represents S, right? And there are like 4 or 5 combinations. You just try them and you can decode the message, right? So this frequency attack was the biggest problem with any sort of encryption. And that went on for a year, for centuries, I should say, till early part of 20th century. So early 1900s, there was a machine that was manufactured and invented, and it was called the Enigma machine. Now, this machine was basically secure and practically uncrackable. It had like gazillion combinations. There was no way you could sort of break it. And it was used a lot during World War II. If you remember, the Nazis had this. They would encode messages using this, and Allies went and fought and used scientists from Poland and Alan Turing and so on and so forth to try to crack it, and they were able to crack it in the end. And we will come to that too. But this machine, to this day, I think remains one of the most successful example of cryptography that was resistant to frequency distribution attack. And the way this machine worked is it's a typewriter in essence, right? And you have 3 rotors you see up top. Each rotor had 26 settings, one for each alphabet, and there's a switchboard on the bottom. So when you shift, so basically 26 times, 3 times this switchboard gives you about 150 million combinations, right? Or million settings, which is basically the probability of you winning Powerball twice in a row. So it's basically virtually uncrackable, right? So you have a setting, you put it in a setting, and you start typing your message. And as you type your message, the white keys will light up that will encode the message for you. And the beauty is that if you type Q, 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 Q 6 times, the resulted encoded message will have PRLMP, right? It will not repeat, right? So there's no way for you to know what frequency of a letter is, because every time you type it, it would be a different letter. So Q typed 8 times will get different answers. And that was the beauty of it. And that is why it was uncrackable. But it was cracked and that's why one of the reasons why we won the war. And the reason it was cracked was because it used what is known as symmetric key cryptography. Basically, what it just means is, as we had talked about previous examples of cryptography, is that both the sender and the receiver needed to know what the settings are. In case of alphabet shift, they both needed to know what the shift is. In case of the stick, they needed to know what the stick is, right? All of these things had this symmetric encryption in it, right? And in case of during World War II, right, when two people, during the war, if one of them was captured, the Allies would have access to the code, the settings, and then they could decode the message. And then the Germans started changing the settings every day or every week. But when they would change the setting, they would have to disseminate the new settings to everyone. And that is when Allies would go and capture that new setting, and then they cracked it. But there were other things they did to sort of crack the whole thing. And there's a movie about it. I think The Imitation Game is where you can watch. It's an amazing movie. They talk about the whole thing. But the flaw of the whole thing is the symmetric key cryptography. And so it makes a little bit sense to sort of further delve into it, right? What it is. Don't look at the picture, right? Just look at me for this particular one example. So the way it works is, there are like right now 20 people in this talk today, right? And if I want to talk to each one of you in a secure way, one way to do it would be to buy 20 different lock boxes, right, with their own set of keys, and I give one key to each of you. And then if I want to send a message to Carol, I'll go to Carol's box, open it, put the message, close it. And then Carol will come, she'll open it, read the message, and that's how we communicate. But let's say I want to change the lock now, right? So what does it involve? I have to get a locksmith, change all 20 locks, get 20 sets of keys, and then send it to all of you, right? So there's a lot of ways. So this is a very cumbersome process, and there are a lot of weak links into it. Locksmith could be compromised when I'm sending keys to you. Your mail could be compromised. And so it's not a way that is good, and not a way that will scale. It'll work for 20 people, but if I would talk to 2,000 or 20,000 people, there's no way I can have 20,000 lock boxes and locks and keys. It doesn't work, right? So that was the problem with symmetric cryptography. So what's the solution? Well, the solution is asymmetric cryptography. And the way this works is similar to the lockbox example, is instead of me having 20 different lockbox, I just have one lockbox, right? And I take it and keep it in the library, and I leave it open. And I leave the key that locks the lockbox attached to the lockbox, right? So whoever wants to send a message to me, let's say Ed wants to send me a message, he'll come write a message, put it in the box, and lock it with the locking key. The beauty of this locking key is that this key can only lock the box. It cannot unlock the box. So once the box is locked, no one else can open it except me, who has the unlocking key. So I'll come, open it, read the message, and leave the box locked with the locking key there, right? So this is a perfect way to sort of communicate. Of course, there's one thing that's different here. Like whoever is sending a message has to sign it, because I'm not going to know who the message is from, because there's just one box. So if Ed is sending a message, he signs as Ed, and if Carol is, she'll sign as Carol, right? And that's it. Now, if I want to change the box, if I want to change the lock, I get a locksmith, or or just buy a new box, put it there, and put the locking key there. And again, anyone can come and use it, right? So this is asymmetric encryption, and this is amazing because it doesn't rely on trusting anyone, right? It's just me, and I just trust myself and my lockbox, and that's it. And this is what led to the explosion of internet as we know today. So if all the internet banking, all the your secure communication using email, everything happens because of asymmetric cryptography. A simple example would be when you go to like chase.com website, right? You see a lock here, lock icon on the browser window, and when you click, that the site is secured. The certificate is issued to JP Morgan and Chase, so this is a secure thing. And then when you type in your username and password, what happens is this whole information, your username and password, is encrypted using the asymmetric key that JP Morgan Chase has sent to your browser, which is similar to that locking key that I was talking about. So JP Morgan Chase sends you the locking key, you lock your username and password in that, and it is sent back to you. And so the advantage here is if anyone is snooping on the messages, so for example, your internet provider like Verizon or Optimum, they could be snooping. All they would see is gibberish that they can't decode, because the key to decode is with Chase, right? So asymmetric cryptography is what led to the revolution in secure internet. And this is the asymmetric cryptography, and signing is the key cryptography primitive, right? That led to the evolution of cryptocurrency. So the cryptography part of cryptocurrency basically are these three primitives: the asymmetric cryptography and signing. So that covers the cryptography part of cryptocurrency, right? Now let's switch gear and talk about money part of it, the currency part of it, right? And we think that we know what money is, but actually I don't think we really know that it's actually a combination of three different concepts. So money for us does three things. It's a medium of exchange. It's something you use to buy stuff. It's a store of value, right? Your wealth is also, expressed in terms of money, and it's a unit of account. So the accounting that happens, your taxes, everything is done through the money, right? And we think it's the same thing, and we don't know a world where it was different. But when it started, all these three things were different. In fact, people do not know how money came into existence, in the sense that was it invented to solve the problem of barter or exchange, or did it come to solve the problem of accounting? And there is no consensus yet, right? But we do know that it's a 10,000-year-old concept, and again, it's a social construct that we as a society thought we came up with. It has helped development of civilization. Without it, I'm not sure we would have developed as fast as we did. And it's a source of a lot of problems. So just to give you a bit of a history on money, in Ethiopia, they used these salt bars that is on the top left of your screen. They use salt bars as money, and hence, if you know the word salary comes from this salt bar, because you would be paid in salt. In Nigeria, they used to use shells, right, as money. In island of Yap, they use these stones, rice stones, and they were like huge. Some of them were tons. They would weigh over a ton as money. And in England, they would use tally sticks for money, right? Now again, there was no inherent property that these things satisfied, except that they were rare, and the society thought we will use them as money, and that's how it was. Ironically, when Europeans found out and decided traveling, they found out what was used for money here. They went and they debased all the currencies. So they got salt from their home, and they sort of took over all of Ethiopia, or at least the trading. Same with shells. They started getting shells from other islands, and then debased the Nigerian currency. And the stones, dry stones, again they bought it from surrounding islands, and they debased the currency too. And then again, these are like some historic examples of currency. Some of the currency that was used, we are aware of, the metals, the copper, the bronze, the silver, right? I mean, this is the Rome gold aureus, and then there's silver in Greece. The first paper currency that I think was used was in China, I think about 800 years ago or so. And it was basically a receipt for grain deposits in one of the granaries, right? So it was you could use this receipt as money and give it to someone else as an exchange of barter. So paper is not that old, but still been around for a few centuries. But if you look at all the currencies, they need to have and satisfy certain properties to be effective. They need to be durable, right? They need to be portable, right? So these stone, which weighed thousands of pounds, of course, was not portable. Divisible, again, many of these didn't have that property. You couldn't divide a shell. Fungible and acceptable. And more importantly, stable, right? You need to have a stable source, right? So the reason that the salt bars or the shells or the rhinestone was debased is because Europeans were able to counterfeit it in some sense and get it from somewhere else. So it was not stable, and which is what basically led to the evolution of over time fiat currency, which is what we use today. So fiat currency satisfies all these properties. It's durable, portable, fungible, go down to the pennies or fraction of pennies if you want to. It's stable because, the government controls it. It has the social and the economic consensus. Everyone agrees this is a great currency. It's accepted for taxes, right? And it is incorporated into a fractional banking system, which, makes finance work the way it works, which is very efficiently. And it's again part of a system of ledgers, banks, and then all the way down to the corporations. So it's great. It does its job. It's amazing. Of course, it has its problem, but other than that, it's pretty good. And so this went on, I think, for almost a century. Paper money was amazing. It resilient, used everywhere. Up until 2000s, when we started using digital money, right? So, but what I mean by that is, when was the last time you have been to a bank? I mean, I haven't been to a bank in 2 years. I don't need to. We pay everything using Venmo or PayPal or Zelle, or many of us do. If you look at the most used form of payment, it's Apple Pay or PayPal in US. And then Alipay, which is like PayPal in China. And Alipay has about almost 1 billion people. So basically, the world is moving towards digital currency. And a very good example is this M-Pesa, this green thing that you see next to PayPal. M-Pesa is a mobile provider in Kenya. It's like T-Mobile or AT&T of Kenya, right? And people would just buy prepaid minutes to use on their cell phone. So I'll buy 100 minutes and pay whatever 10 Kenyan dollars for it. And then what started happening is when you go to buy food or any items, people realized that instead of using money, they could use minutes. So you would say, I want an apple, and the guy would say, that apple is worth 10 minutes or 5 minutes. And so what a person would do is give 5 minutes to this guy on his phone and get an apple. So minutes became a currency. It's used by 20 million people. And the reason it worked is because Kenya, most of the people there are unbanked. They don't have access to banking solution. All right. So and it's always not possible to carry cash with you. Like we can use debit card, right? If you don't have money, but they didn't have that. So they used minutes. And it became so popular that I think they applied for a banking license. And now they are officially, they have a banking license too. So M-Pesa is an example of a digital money that was successful, great, and was not issued by central banks. So just to give you this is an example of currency that is not issued by government and is successful. But all of these things that you see here, PayPal, M-Pesa, Apple, whatever, they have one property, and that is that they are centralized, right? So what I mean by centralized, what I mean is if I want to send money to, let's say, Judy, right? What I do is through PayPal. So I say I want to send $20 to Judy. What happens is I send this transaction to PayPal. PayPal will look at my account and see, hey, whether does Harmeet have $20? And if it does, it'll deduct 20 from my account and give it to Judy, right? Similarly, that's what Apple does. That's what M-Pesa does, right? So they're all centralized, right? There is, at least before 2008, there was no way to do that in a decentralized fashion. And by decentralized fashion, I mean in a way that there is no central authority that sits in the middle doing that. People have tried to solve the problem. From late 80s, right, till 2008, there were a lot of attempts. And you can see some examples on the slide on the right. DigiCash, CyberCash, eGold, Hashcash, and B-Money. They tried and they all failed. And they failed because of various issues, right? One was some of them were centralized, some of them were not adopted, but the biggest problem was double spending and consensus. So double spending means I can't spend the $10 twice, right? So right now, if I try to do it during PayPal, PayPal will say, hey, Harmeet, you don't have $20, you only have $10. You can only spend $10, right? But when it's decentralized, that's harder to do. And that remained a problem up until 2008. So in 2008, a person or persons called Satoshi Nakamoto, and I'm saying person or persons because no one knows who Satoshi Nakamoto is. But people believe that it's a group of people, right, who came up with the pseudonym Satoshi Nakamoto. Published an article on Newsgroup. Back in the days, Newsgroup was very popular. Now people don't use it, but that's what you would use back then to communicate. And he published a paper, and the paper is still available on the same website, right? It's an 8-page paper. It's actually very simple. So when you get a chance after this presentation, you should go and read. And he said that, yes, I have solved this problem. That is, I've come up with a cash that is fully peer-to-peer, and there is no trusted third party needed, right? And that was true, and that led to the whole evolution and revolution of cryptocurrencies. But what you would notice is this Satoshi just used cited 8 papers in his research. And these are, if you look at the names, they are the same people who had tried to come up with a digital currency and failed, right? So this whole thing it's not something new that he come up with. Most of it is basically taking good ideas from predecessors and trying to stitch them together to come up with this whole new way of transferring money in a trustless environment. So with that, we'll dive a little bit into what Bitcoin is. This part is a little bit technical. So if you understand like 60% of what I'm about to say, you would be an expert in cryptocurrency, because not many people understand even 5% of it. So what is actually a Bitcoin? So Bitcoin, if you really think about it, is just a log of all the transactions. That's what it is. There's nothing more to it. People call that log ledger. You must have heard ledger or blockchain. It refers to the same thing. It's a log of all transactions. So I give money to you, you give money to someone else, and then so on and so forth. It's a log. And it's a log that's append only. So all you can do to the log is just write a new transaction. I'm sending this much money to this person at this time, right? And you just keep on adding, and this becomes big and big and big. And so now it's worth, like, I think right now it's like 20 terabytes or maybe more, right? It's a huge log. So this log then, this log is secure because it uses all the cryptographic function we talked about. So it is tamper resistant, right? And it's very efficient to query it, right? So basically it's nothing but an auditable database of all transactions, right? And it resides in the internet. So it resides, all this ledger, it has multiple copies, millions of copies, and it resides on internet on people's computer, right? Where it resides, those are called nodes or miners. And actually anyone can become a node or miner. So if you want, today you can go connect to internet, download Bitcoin software, download the ledger, and you can become a miner. right? So anyone can become it, and that's the whole part of trustless environment. Anyone can come and participate and be a miner. They run 24/7, right? The nodes are the one that provide power to the whole transaction system. But before we go to the nodes and the miner, let's talk a little bit more about this, what I mean by append only log, right? So we'll go into details into this log thing, right? So so basically this log is basically chopped up into blocks, hence the name blockchain. And every block has a few thousand transactions. So in case of Bitcoin, every block has about 1,400 to 2,000 transactions, right? So whenever a transaction happens, you keep on adding it, and once they reach about 2,000, you make a block out of it and you stick it into the blockchain. That's it. And then you move on and write a new block. So right now, I think in Bitcoin, there are about 800,000 blocks, right? And every 10 minutes, a new block is written to the blockchain, right? And a block is nothing but just about 2,000 transactions. That's it. But it has one extra feature. Every block has what is known as hash of a previous block, right? And this is the most important part. This hash is where the whole magic is, right? So I'll try to explain it to you. Hash of a block is nothing but take all the transactions and then compress it into a, compress is not the right word, but we'll go with that. Compress it into a 64 character hash. So you see these character hashes on the right, this blue highlighted one and the one that's not highlighted, right? That's what it is. You take all the transaction, you compress it and make a hash out of it. This compression, making hash out of it, is what exactly is known as mining, that you must have heard of, right? Mining takes a lot of electricity, or there are a lot of miners. That's all they are doing. They're taking this transaction and finding the hash. And finding hash is hard because it needs to have certain properties, but that's what it is, right? So once you found a hash of a block, right, you put that hash in the next block. So block 3, for example, has all the transactions and hash of block 2, right? Block 2 has all the transaction it has and a hash of block 1. And if you think about it in a more metaphysical sense, this hash of block 1 is nothing but compressed transaction that block 1 has, right? So block, and the hash of block 2 is nothing but all the transaction block 2 has and a hash of block 1. And hash of block 1 is nothing but all the transaction of block 1, right? So if you keep on going, if you reach to current block, which is 800,000, it has basically all the information of blockchain since inception encrypted into this hash. And it sounds a bit confusing, but you see these two hashes that I have written here. Just to give you an idea, one hash is a hash of my name. It's a compression of my name. Well, my name is smaller than 64 characters, so actually it's expansion of my name. But in cryptocurrency, everything comes to 64 block. And the second block that you see, which looks in the same size as my name, is actually all the work of William Shakespeare, right? So this is the beauty of it. Like, you can compress everything into 64 bytes. And again, compression is not the right phrase, but we'll go with that, right? So because of that, if you try to change anything in block 1, right, if you try to tamper with it, this hash will stop working, and you will know, hey, you can't do that because it's changing the hash of everything that was done before it. And this particular property of cryptocurrency makes it secure. And I understand this is a bit complicated, so I'll take the questions in the end. But if you understand a part of it, that's good enough, right? So this is this whole block, right? This is the ledger. This has all the transaction, and it lives on internet, right? These are computers. Every computer has a copy of that blockchain. These computers are connected to each other, and every computer can be reached by other computer by at max 6 hops. So you heard of 6 degrees of separation, Kevin Bacon's. That's exactly what this is, right? Every computer is 6 degrees apart, right? So and as I've said, anyone can be this node or miner or computer. You can be today. It takes like 20 minutes. It's not hard at all. So then how does a transaction work, right? Well, what is Bitcoin transaction? Think of a Bitcoin transaction as just a check that you write when you write a check to a bank. It's basically, this is a check. There's a timestamp where the date is. There is who are you paying to. So instead of a name, you have a wallet, that 64 character thing that I showed you. And then your account number is also a wallet. That's again, that when I say 64 character thing, This is what I meant, this blue thing. Everything is 64 character in Bitcoin, right? And then there is a signature. Signature is again digital signature here, but which is very similar to the signature you write in a check. So you write a check, right, and you send it to a node, right? So you send this to a node. Hey, I want to. So this is Bob. This is John. John is sending 10 Bitcoins to Bob, right? It sends the transaction on a node. So node will go. Node has access to the whole ledger. It will take a look whether this transaction makes sense, and it will propagate the transaction. So to go into a little bit more detail, right? This is a transaction that you send to a node. Node has all these previous transactions. So what it'll do is it'll look at the check. It'll say, hey, John is sending money to Bob. So let's look at John's wallet. It looks at John's wallet because it has access to all the transactions. So it'll say, hey, John, yes, John has that much money. Yes or no? If it does, then it'll go further. It'll see Bob's wallet. So does that even exist? Is it a valid wallet? If it is, then it'll look at the signature. Is it a valid signature? It'll look at timestamp. Does it make sense? When everything checks, it takes the transaction and puts it here. So it'll become transaction number 12, right? That's it. That's all there is to it, right? And this is how Bitcoin works. So it's very similar to what bank does. When you go to a bank, you give a check to it. That's what bank does. It sees whether you have the money. It sees who the receiver is, and then it'll talk to receiver's bank and see whether whether receiver account exists and whether we can send it. That part is taken care of by the same miner here. You don't have to go to some other bank to figure that out. So it sounds very sort of simple, right? But there is one thing that I have not talked about is how does this mechanism prevent fraud? So we'll talk about that, and then I think that should make more sense as to how this thing works, right? So let's say Bob, right? Bob wants to be a little naughty, and he only has 10 Bitcoins in his account, right? But he wants to double spend it. So he does a transaction. He sends 10 to John, right? And 10 to Alice, right? And he knows that because these nodes are far apart, he would send one transaction to node A and one transaction to node C, which is very, very far apart. And probably it's slow, right? So it knows that. So Bob knows that, and he does that in the hopes that he would be able to send 10 to John, 10 to Alice, and buy 2 products from them, right? So it sends a transaction. And let's, for completeness, talk about a node B also, which is in the middle, which gets access to both the transactions. So node A only knows about the $10 Bob is sending to John, and node C only knows about 10 Bitcoins that Bob is sending to Alice. But node B, because it's in the middle, it knows about both the transactions, right? So what happens next? This is how it looks like. Node A also has a lot of other transactions that's processing, but it got Bob to John transaction, right? It is going to say, hey, Bob has 10 Bitcoins. He's sending to John. Makes sense. I think this transaction is legal. It's going to put it in its set of transactions. Node C will say, hey, I know Bob has 10 Bitcoins. It's sending 10 to Alice. It's legal. I'm going to put it here. Now, node B will say, hey, look, Bob has 10 Bitcoins and it's trying to send 10 to John, 10 to Alice. That doesn't make sense. I'm going to cancel one transaction. Right? It cancels one transaction. And then, this is how it looks like. Node A, Bob to John. Node B also thinks Bob to John is a valid transaction, and node C thinks Bob to Alice is a valid transaction. So all these nodes have a different picture of what the transaction will look like. And that's how it works in real life. But then what happens? Then what happens is all these nodes will start calculating the hash that I talked about, right? The mining. They will try to compress it to come up with that 64-byte thing. And they'll all try, and the node that does it the first gets to write it officially to the blockchain, right? Right now, it's only in the computer. When they find the hash, they make it official. So what's going to happen? Only one of them will win. Only one of them will get to it first and write it on the blockchain. If node A wins first and node B wins first, then Bob to John transaction is legal. If node C wins first, Bob to Alice transaction is illegal, right? So what has happened? What has happened is Bob can only spend once, right? Now, whether it goes to John or Alice, that depends on who is able to mine first. But Bob cannot double spend, so he can't cheat. He can't do fraud. And that is what was the biggest sort of takeaway from Satoshi Nakamoto's paper, right? Like, you can't do double spend. It's not possible. And because node do so much work, they calculate transaction, they check, they do all the things, you need to give them incentive. Because yeah, today you can start being a node and you would say, why would I do that? Why would I do so much, spend so much electricity on my computer? Well, because the node that gets to write on the blockchain gets a reward. The reward right now is 6.5 Bitcoin, which depending on the price of Bitcoin could be anywhere from 150 to $400,000. And this is done every 10 minutes. Right. And this is why, right, there are a lot of miners. There's this whole competition to start mining rig and to get the hash rate, because the reward is big. It's it's almost $500,000 every 10 minutes. So if you think about in a day, you're talking about millions of dollars. And so this is actually how money is introduced into the system, right? So every 10 minutes you get 6.5 Bitcoins added to the system, right? So this is how, like in normal stuff, in normal banking, the banks or the central banks does monetary easing and it increases the money flow. In case of Bitcoin, it happens every 10 minutes automatically. And so the reward for people who do mining is this money that you get in the end. And so this whole thing has a lot of advantages, right? Why Bitcoin is used. The biggest advantage is it helps prevent the fiat currency problems that come with unsound policy, right? So hyperinflation that we have seen in Venezuela and Zimbabwe would not happen with this. It will not lead to the crisis and the instability that we have with fiat currency. So if you know, in 2008, the whole banking crisis, the great financial crisis, the inflation right now, right? So that would, again, Bitcoin will prevent that. And there are no central intermediaries. So if you remember in 2008, Lehman crashed and that almost, and AIG, and that almost crashed our financial system. Well, you don't have that problem when you use Bitcoin. And then again, right, you don't have to worry about counterparty risk, settlement cost, because it's all taken care of by the system. But the biggest advantage I think that Bitcoin has is financial inclusion. So if you remember, I talked about Kenya and M-Pesa, or those mobile minutes thing. The reason it was popular is because people didn't have bank. Right now, 2 billion people don't have access to banking, but most of them do have access to phone or a computer. Right? So if we can make these people bank, it would lift a lot of people out of poverty. So there are some advantages of using cryptocurrencies, but everything has disadvantages too. So for Bitcoin, the problem is, of course, there is 7 transactions per second. That's all you could do. And as opposed to MasterCard, Visa, which does 20,000-30,000 transactions per second. It takes hours to finalize the transactions. Imagine you're buying Starbucks coffee and you're waiting 2 hours to get your coffee because payment does not go through. And transaction cost is a lot, right? It used to be 60, now it's $1 or so per transaction, which is still a lot for micro transaction. And again, energy, right? We know, like, amount of energy that's used to do Bitcoin, and that's bad. And there is no good public policy legal framework around it. Even now, even after so many scams, there is nothing, regulations here. But that problem has been solved generally. There are other currencies like Solana, Ethereum that have solved that problem. For example, Solana, you can do 50,000 transactions per second, which is much more than MasterCard, Visa. And the transaction cost is 0.0025, which is less than MasterCard, Visa transaction, right? They charge 1.9%. And in sub-second clearing. So the transaction clears faster than your credit card transaction. Plus it's carbon neutral. They don't use mining. They use what is known as proof of a stake. So you don't have to spend the energy and the money that you spend to mine. And the biggest thing that these altcoins, Ethereum is the second biggest coin after Bitcoin, they brought into the world is the concept of smart contracts, right? So I'll go over it briefly before we go to questions, because I think that's important, right? So Ethereum is just like Bitcoin, except it added a concept called smart contract, right? So it's like a check, right? Now, instead of Bitcoin, it's Ethereum, but the same thing, signature. But what you have now is this, if you don't know in check, there is a field called for, like, what is this check for? You can now, Ethereum added that feature. So now you can say, hey, I'm giving you this money, right? But only for this particular purpose, right? It's a building block. With that building block, right, you can do a lot of things. For example, a decentralized finance, loaning. I can loan you money. I can say, I'll pay you 10 ether now, but you have to give me back 11 later. And that's a smart contract. And now it's a legal contract, but the way, because it's written in computers and the way it's designed, there is no way you can say, hey, I'm not giving you the money, because it will be deducted from your wallet because it has been pre-collateralized. Similarly, you can use the same thing. Hey, I'm going to give you money, but in the return, I want music. I want to stream music, like Spotify, for example, can be converted into a smart contract. And so you would get rid of the record labels, the so many companies that sit in the middle for royalty connections. And it's the artist who is streaming the music and the listener who is getting it, and the money is paid through smart contract. And again, digital collectibles, NFTs, we have talked about that briefly, like NBA Top Shots or the Beeple, that was $60 million painting. Again, that's something that you do in that for thing in smart contract. So this is the Beeple painting that I think sold for, I think so, $60 million. And again, the way it says is, hey, I'm giving this money, and this money is for this particular painting, right? And so now it's in the ledger, it's in black and white that this painting belongs to you because it's in the smart contract. Right? So that is, and this smart contract led to what explosion of NFTs, which is, if you really think about it, it's a receipt of the transaction that you did. I think this is, I'll not get too much into details here between fungible and non-fungible token unless someone has a question. But let me end with why this is important in like normal word for you and us, you and me, right? So I remember I talked about Spotify. So the way Spotify works is you have an artist, you have record label, Spotify, and the lawyers that sit in the middle, they try to figure out how much money has to be paid. So this has like 4 or 5 different entities sitting in the middle. There's a company, there's a product called Audience, which takes care of, removes all that, right? You have Rihanna who records a song, you listen, you pay her 0.0011 cents for that song, done. No one is involved in the middle. Uniswap is an exchange that is like NASDAQ. You can trade there, and it generates $5 or $6 million per day in revenue, like real money, real dollars. And that's more than most of the exchanges do. So that's a real world example of where this is really having an impact. Axie Infinity, again, at least 6 months ago, it was one of the biggest project in gaming thing in Philippines. It was pulling people out of poverty. There was an article on Fortune magazine that it had pulled hundreds of thousands of people out of poverty in countries like Philippines, because what they would do is they'll play the game and then they'll be rewarded, right? So again, real money. It made about $300 million, real money a month. And then there are NFTs, which are collectible artworks, Bored Apes, CryptoPunk, that are basically worth millions of dollars that are traded. Baseball cards, art, NBA cards that we talked about, Top Shots. And then games. And like if you have seen Ready Player One, the movie, or read the book, there is a game called Decentraland, which is doing the same thing, right? So this the impact of Web3 projects and cryptocurrency is real, and it is it's not a matter of if, it's just a question of when you would be immersed in it and it'll take over the world. With that, I would open up for questions if you have any. I think
Okay, there's somebody that raised their hand. We did want to have it in the chat function, if at all possible. If you could type it in there. I'll see if I could get the chat function.
If you want, we can unmute people.
Let me see. Okay, I could allow one per Mitali Chopra. You could talk if you unmute yourself.
Hi there. Can you hear me? It's actually her
Yep.
husband. Um,
Oh,
Thanks for the presentation. This is very interesting. Um, I guess my question is, with the proliferation of cryptocurrencies, like, how do we know which is the winner? You know, there's
So
one US dollar. You know, it seems like there's a new crypto currency that's being created by some
uh-huh.
new person.
Right. So
So, can you elaborate on that, please?
yes, so three ways to go about it. This is a very interesting question, and it's not a simple answer, right? So if you think about uh, .com boom, I don't know whether you were around then, you remember it, but they were like millions, or even now, there were millions of companies that came out, right? Many of them didn't have any product. Some of them were outright fraud, right? So you have to do your own diligence, right? So cryptocurrencies have come into, there are two broad categories. So one is the base coin, like so Bitcoin, Ethereum, Solana. They are like USD, dollar, yen, right? Euros. And then there are cryptocurrencies which are more like stocks, right? So you're basically buying in the project. So cryptocurrencies like Axie Infinity, Axie Coin, right? Or Uniswap coins, tokens, right? The Uniswap is basically, remember I told you about an exchange that's like NASDAQ. So you are basically investing in that company, right? Which is why, SEC should actually regulate them and call them registered security, but that's a discussion topic for another discussion. So the short answer is you do not know which is going to work, which is not going to work. But there are ways you can get to a better answer. So for example, go to Coinbase, right? Coinbase and Gemini are the two US exchange where you can trade. Go there and look at the currencies that are listed there. So Coinbase does some vetting. I'm using the word loosely, but they do some vetting. So you can at least know, hey, these coins probably are okay, right? But if you want my advice, I would say don't invest in anything. If you really want to invest in, don't dip your toes, open an account in Coinbase or Robinhood or Gemini, buy Bitcoin, buy Ethereum, buy Solana. Don't go into these altcoins. But if you really want to go into the altcoins, then go and look at the use case, like ODS that I mentioned, Uniswap that I mentioned in the slide earlier. Go and look at the companies like that and try to see, hey, does it make sense? Is there real revenue? Are there real users? It's something that you would do when you buy a stock of any company anyways, right? So it's more like a VC investing, less like a stock investing. You have to do more due diligence. There is no simple answer or simple way.
If I can just ask a follow-up. So, there's people that say, look, Bitcoin is going to be worth 100,000 or whatever.
Uh-huh.
And my question is, what's that based on? I mean, what's the discounted cash flow model? Like, what is the basis for the value, or is it pure speculation?
That is so discounted cash flow model doesn't work on Bitcoin because Bitcoin is a currency. So you don't do discounted cash flow model for USD value, right? Or JPY value, right? You do other things, right? You look at the relative interest rates, the strength of the country, the military power, and so export deficit, all that stuff, right? So in terms of Bitcoins, right? In terms of cryptocurrency, what you'd have to use is, what is the use case? How are they being used, right? It's like gold. What is the value of gold? I mean, value of gold is whatever someone will pay for it. Of course, there's a cost price, time, the amount of money it takes to extract the gold from the gold ores and refine it. But the price of gold is not based on that. It's based on what people are paying for it, based on inflation fears or war fears. So Bitcoin, Ethereum are those assets, right? So there is the basis for it is same basis that you have for pricing gold or JPY or EUR or USD, demand supply, right? I hope that answers.
Yeah, no, it does. But what's the idea of scarcity value, right? I mean,
so
if there's a proliferation of coins,
there is not, right?
Then
so Bitcoin
what's
is
the?
It's not. Bitcoin is 6.25 every 10 minutes, and 2 years from now, 1 year from now, I think it's going to get halved to 3.2, and I think in less than 50 years time, there'll be no more of it that is going to be basically mined. So there is a curve for it, and the curve basically plateaus after a few years. So it's not proliferation. There is a finite amount of it, right? So again, whether that's a right model or wrong model, we don't know, because once it's tapped, you might get the price might shoot even further. Ethereum doesn't have that problem, but Ethereum doesn't cap it. It has other ways of managing the supply. So every currency has its own way of doing it. People prefer one over the other. And again, what I would do is I would look at the ecosystem. Who is developing on Ethereum? What are the companies that are being built on Ethereum? And go and invest in those companies. Or if you're looking at Ethereum versus Bitcoin versus Solana versus Avalanche, you look at what is being built on those and invest accordingly.
Okay, we're going to have to go on to the next question. All right. This is Margot. Margot, unmute. You're muted.
I'm unmuted now, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
All right. Can this be used for ordinary everyday transactions in any way?
So it's interesting. Yes, answer is yes and no, right?
Okay.
It was the first transaction I think it was used was to buy a pizza, Papa John's, I think, or Domino's. Someone paid 10,000 Bitcoins to buy a pizza. I think that was the most expensive pizza I ever bought. That's how it started. So the simple example is PayPal. If you use PayPal, PayPal has PayPal comes with a crypto wallet in it. So if you have a PayPal account, you can actually put your Bitcoin there. And then when you make any transaction with PayPal, you can use that. So it's transparent to you. So yes, you can use it to pay for everyday transaction. Should you use it to pay everyday transaction? That's a different topic because Bitcoin is volatile, right? So unlike US dollar, which is generally stable, now it's volatile because of inflation, but generally it has been stable. Bitcoin has gone from like what, 65,000 to 20,000 in 6 months. So you probably don't want to use it for payment yet. But people do it. People have bought stuff. I mean, Elon Musk used to accept Bitcoin for Tesla a few years ago, a few months ago, and then he stopped, I think, last year. Dell used to let you pay by Bitcoin. Newegg.com, where you buy computer equipment, had a Bitcoin thing. But now with PayPal, you can just use PayPal to pay for, use Bitcoin to fill in your PayPal wallet and then pay wherever PayPal is accepted.
The other thing that's bothering me, because I don't understand it, is the mining of it. I don't understand the energy usage in order to create these different Bitcoins or cryptocurrencies.
Yes, so most of the cryptocurrencies are moving away from that mining model, right? So Bitcoin is the last one that remains, that will remain. Oh. Most of the other crypto coins, because they realize, right, this is not great. It's in some sense waste of energy. So they are moving away for it, right? So Ethereum, the second biggest chain, is going to move away this year, or it's planning to at least. So yeah, that concern is being taken care of by the Bitcoin community. So eventually you'll come to a stage where you're not using energy, except maybe for Bitcoin. And there is a reason for it, because that's what makes it very secure.
Okay.
The reason is that if someone wants to take over Bitcoin, right? Let's say Russia or China says, let's take over the Bitcoin, right? For them to do, they need the amount of energy that they don't have currently. So they just can't do it, right? That's what makes it secure. Like no one entity can come and disrupt it.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
All right, and the last question from Shweta Singhal. If you unmute yourself, you could talk. There you go.
Hi, thank you so much for the presentation. I'm here with my 12-year-old and we're really enjoying hearing more about this. So thank you for doing this. I really like the cross out on the end and the fact that you kind of point out that this is still early stages in the beginning. What do you think needs to happen for things to sort of scale up and take off? Is it the regulatory environment? Is it more education? And I know there's some concerns about use for, things like illegal transactions and, kind of things that could be more nefarious. So just would love to get your thoughts on that.
Yes. So let's start with the illegal transaction part, right? So if you remember, the first thing I said is append only log, right? So every transaction is recorded. So, I guess FBI would love for people to use this for money laundering because they can track easily, right? Because everything is on chain, so you can't hide the transaction. Now, there are ways to mask it, but anytime you go out and take the money out from exit node, you'll be tracked. So it's not a great way of money laundering or hiding, right, for nefarious activities. So there is that. I mean, yeah, there are some cases where like if you are within Russia and then you're just giving an example of that, any state that is sponsoring terrorism and they have exit node and they are encouraging state-sponsored whatever illegal activities, there is a possibility, but it's very hard to sort of hide it. So it's not great for money laundering or doing nefarious activities. For it to take off, two things need to happen, and they've already started happening because of all the crashes that we have seen. So SEC, right, is already started coming and trying to give more guidance onto it. They haven't, which is ironic because this talk that I gave today, a lot of it is from Gary Gensler. He used to be a professor at MIT before he became the chairman of SEC, and he gave a big talk on cryptocurrency, a full course of 17 one-hour lectures, right? And he touched on all these points, right? And it's ironic that now he's as his chief, and he didn't do anything to sort of regulate it or put legal framework around it. So that needs to happen, so that people who get burned by these scamsters, right? That doesn't happen. But once you put regulation, right, that also sort of puts brakes on it taking off, right? So it's a two-edged sword. And as far as the question, like what will it do? I think the second question that you asked, I think it has already taken off, right? The amount of money that VC poured in, the amount of money that was put in is in trillions of dollars. The Luna crash, I don't know whether you remember, that happened earlier this year. The VCs lost about $1 trillion on it collectively, right? So and I was talking to one of them, and they don't even care because they had made so much money doing other stuff. Point being, a lot of money is being poured into it. It's taking off. It's just, this is a dip. Like if you remember, .com crash happened in 2000. We are in that stage. From the ashes, you will see the companies like Google or Facebook emerge, right? And Amazon. So that's what you will see. So it's already there, right? It's already taking off. We need a little bit more regulatory framework around it, though, I think.
Okay. All right. This was amazing. This was a very frank and open discussion. And for me, who knows nothing about this, it was quite the eye opener. So thank you. If there are any other questions, you might as well please raise your hand now. If not, I want to thank Harmeet for doing this program. I mean, it's been a long time. So thank you very much for staying over the time. And thank you all for coming. And I hope to see you at all our other programs. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.